morning and good afternoon to everyone wherever you are around the country today, and welcome to our webinar today as well. My name's Chris Manning and I'm from Water Sensitive Cities Australia, and I'll be your host for today. So the webinar today is looking at economic evaluation in regional Victoria. And before I go any further, I'm going to do an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the Bindal people of Thulgari Wajah, which is in Townsville, where I am based, in the south of Ross River. I'd also like to acknowledge the First Nations peoples from around the country who have and continue to play a key role in water resource management and stewardship. I pay my respects on behalf of all of us to their elders, past, present and emerging. While we're at it, we would encourage you to actually just input into the chat which part of the country you're coming from and which traditional owner lands you're sitting on as well. Just input that into the chat. So as I said, we'll be talking about economic evaluation in regional Victoria today, and we've got a cast of experts, including Associate Professor Syed Iftikhar from Griffith Uni, Ben Firmage, the CEO of Water Sensitive Cities Australia, and Jamie Ewart from Alluvium Group. And we've also got Darcy Whiffen from DECA in Victoria as well. So what we're going to do today is Darcy's going to quickly talk about the project drivers for the government department DECA and why they commissioned us to do the project. Ben's going to talk a little bit about the project approach and methodology. Then Syed will talk about the economic assessment and the details and the theory around that for integrated water management. And then Jamie's going to bring it together with a case study in a little town called Beaufort, and the case study is called Beaufort Linear. And then we'll finish off with some question and answers. What I would encourage you to do is input your question and answers into the Q&A part of the platform at any time throughout the session. And then when we get to the Q&A session, we'll go through those. And what I might suggest also is if you've got a particular question for a particular presenter, then just put their name at the front of your question so that I know who to point the question to. If you don't have a particular person to point it to, then we'll just point it to the team and work it out as we go, basically. So Darcy, would you like to talk a little bit about the drivers from DECA's perspective to get us going?
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, good day, everyone. My name's Darcy Whiff and I'm a project officer in the Regional Integrated Water Management team at DECA. And so, look, I just firstly want to thank Water Sensitive Cities for taking on this webinar, and also thank you guys for all attending this. It's great to see some interest in this topic. So I guess the drivers for this project is that we want to support regional practitioners to develop business cases for IWM, and I guess equip them with the skills and knowledge that is contextual to the regional settings. At DECA in the IWM program, some of you may know that we're divided into a metro team and a regional program as well. And so we have visibility over both, and we probably detected that there was a bit of a gap with the opportunity for regional practitioners to develop business cases supported with economic evaluation in comparison to the metro counterparts. And I think it's important to be clear on why we think that gap exists. And I think it can probably be brought down to a couple of things. And firstly, for regional practitioners such as yourself, you wear many hats, and mainly your engineers or your waterway managers, asset managers, or planners that do IWM on the side, where in Metro, often they've been employed because they have IWM expertise, or they've been employed and then their organisation has the flexibility as well as the capacity to put them through specific IWM training. And I guess furthermore on that, historically, IWM training, especially for economic evaluation, has been quite Metro focused. So there's been a lack of opportunity for regional context for this. And also, even further to that, the economic evaluation for IWM, the data that supports that has often been from metro studies, and that's not so easily transferable to regional cases. So this work was done so to try and provide a bit more data to support economic evaluation as well. And so I guess all these reasons culminated in DECA approaching water sensitive cities to address this by delivering, I guess, tailored guidance materials as well as a masterclass series to support regional stakeholders to improve their capacity to undertake economic evaluation. I guess in simplified terms, just to support them to develop a business case to secure project funding. It's so important, particularly in times like now when we're operating in such a fiscally constrained environment where there's so many competing priorities, that without an economic business case to support your project, you can often get left behind. And so, developing a business case that's supported with sound economic evaluation, as well as really well articulated benefits and economic values in terms of dollar figures, it just provides you the opportunity to bolster your project submissions for funding, as well as attract investment more privately. We've experienced recently that developers are really getting more interested in, I guess, ESG as well as IWM. So being able to give them figures to attract their interest in your projects is also really important. So we think this work can help practitioners attract funding internally, whether that's through the allocation of their funds from their own organisation, or externally through funding streams, whether that's the federal urban rivers funding, for an example, or whether it's disaster ready funding, as well as more state level stuff such as tiny town funds. So we think if you have these this business case behind you, can just help you compete a bit more, and as well, like I said, with private investment. So that's, I guess, the background as to why this work has been done. And yeah, thanks again for all coming to this. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Darcy. So Ben Vermage from the he's the CEO of the Water Sensitive Cities Australia, is going to talk a little bit about the project approach and methodology to address the drivers that Darcy just articulated.
Great. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Chris. As Darcy noted, competition for available funding and financing these days is pretty fierce. Times are pretty tight. So if you've got a budget proposal, a funding application or a business case, and you haven't made the benefits really clearly, then you're unlikely to get funding support. So I guess our project was really trying to sort of bolster capacity to do that. But we know that IWM projects are a little bit challenging in building that benefits case. In particular, unlike the costs of IWM projects that are normally well-defined upfront and concentrated on a small number of people or organisations, the benefits can be undefined or hard to define. It's hard for anyone to give you a bucket of livability. What is that? How do you quantify it? They're quite often spread across a large number of people or organisations, and they quite often accumulate over time, whereas the costs can be quite upfront. So it can be a challenge to identify, to build that benefit case. And we know, as Darcy said, in the regions, there are some additional challenges associated with all of that. Each place is different. It has a different climate, a different geography. It might be on the coast or inland. It has, the population might be growing in some places or decreasing in the other. The values of each regional location can be different as well. What might be a benefit to one area might be a cost to another. We also understand that regional areas are often made up of a large number of small towns or distributed systems, rather than the big connected system in metropolitan areas. There's often not a lot of data. And the people that are doing these analyses, putting together the evidence to support the case, quite often wear multiple hats. They do multiple jobs. They may not have a lot of experience in BC benefit cost analysis. And we've also, through our conversations, we also understand that there's quite a bit of turnover in people. So the person who's got the responsibility now may not be the one who's built the case when a similar project was put forward. So So not easy, but really important. And I guess that was, as was noted, our project is really about trying to understand the challenges associated with doing BCA, and specifically quantifying the benefits of IWM projects in regional areas, and providing some practical tools and advice and training so that people can better identify what these what these benefits are, quantify them in physical terms, and then value them in economic terms. So our approach was to start by listening. So there was a series of 5 focus groups drawing on representatives from 9 regional IWM forums, with representatives also from local government, the water utilities and CMAs. Those focus groups, first of all, sort of helped us get a really good understanding of what the challenges are in regional areas. And those challenges were grouped around the 7 outcome areas for IWM that have been provided by Water for Victoria. We then used the 25 benefit categories that are in the Infuse Value tool, and Syed will talk about that a little bit more in a sec, as a starting point for a discussion around what are the benefits that are really important to Victorian regional areas. They were prioritised, and we had some extra ones added. And those focus groups were then a really good input to helping us shape up 4 masterclasses. We also did a pre-survey in those masterclasses. And that pre-survey was really helpful in that it helped us identify that only about 1/3 of the people participating had IWM as a part of their everyday job. And then around 2/3 of the people participating said that their involvement with BCA was rare, if ever. So that really helped us make sure that we had some, so we targeted the information right, and it saw us, the modules focus on some BCA fundamentals, and then what are the things that, as a potential procurer of economic advice, what are the things that you need to ask, you need to think about, and to make sure that if you engage an economic consultant to do some of these benefit cost assessments, the numbers look right, and they help you build a really strong defensible case. The outputs of the masterclasses and the focus groups were then used to update some of our economic tools, particularly the values tool, and Syed will talk a little bit more about that in a second. And they also were applied through 2 case studies and written up in a number of documents, and you can see the front covers of those documents there with a link to them. There's an overall summary report, a Part A technical report, which sort of talks through the fundamentals of benefit cost analysis and how do you adopt a form of benefit cost analysis that is fit for purpose. The Part B then talks about some individual benefits and some approaches for identifying, quantifying and valuing those benefits. And then we've got the 2 case studies. So there's also the trainings, the sessions have also been turned into some YouTube clips, and they're also available for people to have a look at. So there's a quick overview of what we did. I'll now pass back to Chris to talk about some of the outputs of the work. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Ben. So we're going to move on to Associate Professor Syed Iftikhar from Department of Accounting, Finance and Economics from Griffith Uni, who is going to talk to you a little bit more about the process, the guidance, the non-market values and the BCAs in this process. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Syed run the show from his side now.
Can you see my screen? Yes, thank you. Okay, thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for attending this webinar. As Chris said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we have been done, specifically focusing on few outputs. So Ben already has highlighted the types of outputs we have produced as part of this project. So I'm particularly focused on the last 2, the updating of the value tool, and then development of a benefit transfer and valuation guideline for regional IWM projects. So I hope you are more or less familiar with the infused value tool? If not, please let us know. We can have a separate chat. But in a nutshell, this is a very big data set of the economic values of water sensitive IWM projects in Australia. And so this is a major output of the CRC for water sensitive cities. So through this project, we have actually updated the tool. So before we started this project, so we had data or records from 192 studies, but we have added quite a number of studies information. So the current version is to have information from 225 studies in terms of individual records or non-market value records. So we also have close to 3,000, and almost 80% of them have some kind of dollar values like willingness to pay or willingness to accept. But we also have added some information where people express in terms of non-dollar, non-monetized values, for example, like probability of improved health or probability of taking like doing exercise because of a public open space or green space. So these kind of things. So the current version of the tool contains records from papers published from 1997 to 2022. And this has been organized in an Excel spreadsheet-based database. And we also have additional value functions, like there are 10 value functions. But what is interesting for specifically from this project is that we have now extra facilities, filtering facilities to identify records related to regional and metropolitan Victoria, which we did not have before. So this is the overall distribution of the broad categories of the values we have in the tool. For example, ecological improvement and biodiversity, about 19% of the total records are related to that. We also have records related to improved opportunities for recreation, improved security of water supply, reduced morbidity and mortality. So these are some of the broad categories of non-market values that you have information on. Now, if we go a detailed breakdown by the Victorian information or related to Victoria, and then breakdown by metropolitan and regional. So you could see that, yes, we have more information related to metropolitan, or the papers are focused more on metropolitan Victorias, but there are some information also regarding regional Victoria, okay, IWF project. So this is what like 287 records related to regional Victoria. And then if you just look at a breakdown, we can see that reduced morbidity and improved health, that has the highest proportion, like 22% of these 287 records are related to that. On the other hand, in metropolitan Victoria, improved opportunities for recreation is the highest one. But what you could also see is that there are some zeros, so like, for example, like improved air quality. This indicates that we do not have any information which could be related to Victoria, but there could be information related to other states of the country. So that means there would be a knowledge gap, or there would be an information gap. But this gives you a broad distribution of the major types of benefits we have on. What is also important, I think, is developing a targeted guideline, and that's what that's already what is available on the link that Ben has shared. So here, what we try to do is to try to synthesize, and we say that, okay, you are interested in the regional IWM projects and evaluating projects. So how do you do that? So what we have done, we have presented the tool itself has been updated and people can do filtering, but in this guideline, we have picked up the most relevant non-market values that could be used to evaluate IWM projects in regional Victoria. But these information are more suitable for rapid economic assessment, so initial screening, okay, not so much for detailed economic assessment. For detailed economic assessment, probably you want to get more data or better quality or more primary data, okay? So just to give you an example, and this is relevant to, we also have consulted a number of existing guidelines, and you can get the slides later. So similar to the broad diagram, the graph that I showed, we have for the regional IWM projects, we have provided guidelines according to the 17 categories. But I should tell you that it was not always easy because of lack or absence of information. For, as I said before, like for example, improved air quality, we did not have any information relevant from Victoria, so we had to get some information from adjacent states. Okay, so that's how we tried to cover, but we tried to provide some benefits or information to. So for example, like improving waterway health, we said that if this is, so we have provided some more details like for selected studies, and then say that, okay, if this is an important benefit of your IWM project, how can you assess it? Okay, so maybe the benefit is related to water quality, benefit is related to the native vegetation. So in that case, we actually have some dollar values. So we said that, okay, this is what the information is in the paper. So this has been adjusted for 2022. And then we said that, okay, how do you use this information? So we provide the guidelines, right? So for example, like first we need to define as part of assessment expected level of improvement. Then we need to identify the number of households who would be benefited by this feature or improved water quality. Then we need to do some kind of adjustment with respect to income to adjust the willingness to pay or willingness to accept data. And then we can calculate the aggregate value. So this is how we have teased out for all those 17 benefit categories and tried to provide detailed but targeted guidelines. So we did not go too much into theoretical, it's more on the empirical aspects of it. So that is it. If there is any question, please put it in the chat. Otherwise, I will hand it to Chris. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Syed. Really quick and excellent summary of the process so far. So we're going to hand over to Jamie. Jamie Hewitt from Alluvium Consulting, and he undertook this process when he was with us with Water Sensitive Cities Australia, and he's going to speak about the Beaufort Linear case study, and essentially on behalf of the local government representative from that little community that's unfortunately not able to attend today because he's dealing with some legacy issues with the fire response, I think. So Jamie's going to pick up the chalice and discuss the Beaufort Linear case study for us. Thanks, Jamie.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Syed and Ben and Darcy for your introductions. This case study, I think Ben mentioned it was one of those cover pictures that he put up on the diagram before. So this case study was really about bringing together the intelligence that we gathered in the project to date. And as Ben said, you can have a look at the actual report that goes along with this if you want to read more information. Just a shout out in terms of Syed and his team did all the number crunching for this one. But we worked very closely with Council and with DECA to put this together. And it kind of represents a good lesson in how to do these sort of things quickly and efficiently, both to get a good answer on a business case, but also to build some capacity, which, as Darcy said at the beginning, was one of the key objectives of this. So shout out to Ray Davis from Council, who was really instrumental in pulling this together. So we're going to have a quick chat about Beaufort Linear. And what I want to do is give you a bit of an overview of what the project is, what we found in doing the benefit cost analysis, and then how that impacted the way the project has continued to be funded through DECA's IWM grants. And for those who are not aware, DECA's IWM grants is a funding mechanism to Victorian partners, be they councils, water authorities and the like, to help support integrated water management or water sensitive projects in Melbourne and in the regions. And DECA's run several rounds of funding to support those sort of organisations, which I think is fantastic. So just in terms of a time frame, this kind of tells you a bit of the story. The Beaufort Linear project been around for a little while, but since about 2016. It was originally developed as a concept within Council and was adopted by Council as a broad strategic initiative to help improve livability and amenity and community outcomes associated with Beaufort Lake, which is a small reservoir that's kind of looking for a new purpose in life. And when the Integrated Water Management Program, Water for Victoria, came about, Beaufort Linear got picked up pretty quickly in the Central Highlands Strategic Direction Statement. What that really means is all of the organisations in that Central Highlands region of Victoria agreed that this was a really good example of what integrated water management could do to support local communities and demonstrate the benefits of the Victorian policy. I mentioned before that DECA's run several rounds of these IWM grants. The Beaufort Linear project was put up in the first round of grants, and my understanding is, look, it wasn't successful there. And that was largely because there were many more projects put up than could be funded, and there had to be a bit of a prioritisation sort of process. So they got a thanks but no thanks and some useful feedback to sort of consider for next time. One of the projects that did get up in that first round is that middle picture there, which says Green Blue Infrastructure Guide. And a shout out to some colleagues there in Carter Consulting and Foresight Advisory. They put that together with a few councils in the southwest region of Victoria. Really a guideline for local councils and for water authorities to look in small towns in particular to ask what can green open space and integrated water management, how that can come together in terms of great IWM projects. And the Beaufort Linear project got picked up in that as another case study of how you might start to design these things and pitch them in a really successful way. And I'll be referring to that guideline as we go through because I think it's good work. The success continued. DECA funded the project that we're talking about today, and Darcy's talked about the rationale for that. Beaufort Linear was suggested as a potential case study, really to sort of nurture it and bring it along, and also because of the types of project that it was focused on. We thought they'd be really good as a case study for the economics of the work. We've published that. That's the picture of the teal coloured project there. That's our publication of this case study. The local council, Ray, put in another application in round 2 of the DECA IWM grants, and this time it was successful. And I'll talk about some of the feedback from there, but what that has led to is the next stage in the development, which is that master plan, that final cover sheet that you can see on the side there. That master plan, since being completed, involves some community engagement on what does the community want for this asset. And then the work is continuing. There's now hydrology and flood studies underway with the CMA to continue that work. So really what I want to do today is tell the story of the role the economic assessment played in that sort of journey from original concept to now projects being funded and underway. Just a little bit of a zoom out to see where we are. We're in the southwest of Melbourne here. You can see the Warrnambool there over the 12 Apostles and the like, and you can see Beaufort at the top of the screen there, and Emu Creek running down to the coast there. If we were to zoom into Beaufort, you can see the township there. Hopefully you can see that the yellow area, which is the creek, the waterway that leads from Beaufort Reservoir in the bottom of the picture up to Yamholes Creek in the top. And really we're asking the question, how can we turn that waterway into an active green corridor that benefits biodiversity and the community? So I mentioned I'd refer back to that Blue-Green Infrastructure Guide. This is just a bit of a snapshot that's got some sort of before and after concept pictures in there showing the creek and what it could look like. And the idea was to develop a green corridor, particularly for communities and for visitors, and that turned out to be a crucial decision, largely because there's an RV park in the region that brings in lots of day trippers and multi-day visitors as well to the area. And there was a need to connect up a bunch of community assets like the school, there's a skate park there, that RV park, and the reservoir itself where people do a lot of exercising and dog walking and those sorts of things. There's been past investment in those assets as individual investments, but it's kind of lacked a bit of a strategic approach. And so the Beaufort Linear, that green link, was an opportunity to bring it together into an overall strategic project for council. And really it's about, as it says there, an opportunity to create a green linkage. So activating biodiversity and amenity and other benefits for the community via waterway rehabilitation. So highly aligned to that idea of green blue infrastructure, nature-based solutions and water-sensitive cities. The Green Blue Infrastructure Guide talked about what makes a successful integrated water management project, and it outlined a series of principles. The ones that really applied here, so elevating it from a non-strategic into a strategic approach here. First one was increasing the multi-functionality of the waterway corridor. How can we get multiple benefits for these projects rather than just doing one thing like providing a walking trail? How can we get multiple benefits? Second one was to adopt a systems thinking approach, really saying we want to focus on environmental improvements, but how can that do things like improve the waterway itself, connect people to nature, maybe to reduce some nuisance flooding that happens in the downstream part of the waterway. Bring those ideas together into a whole of system approach to the project. And then to provide high amenity trails that connect community assets. So that idea that integrated water management is not just about saving water or improving water quality, it can do a whole lot of other things. Just for context, just some photos of what it looks like now. I've seen worse waterways in my time, but you can see there's plenty of opportunity there. And you can also see a reference in that photo on the left to a Koori Art Trail, which is another council initiative. And that helped to bring in some cultural values and some cultural benefits into the project as well. That's just helping to set the scene. If we have a look at the project itself, so remember I showed you before that we're looking at the waterway between Yamholes Creek and the reservoir. Previous consultants have had a look at what some specific project opportunities might be. So really the Beaufort Linear is a series of individual projects that get connected up along this green waterway corridor. Long story short, we had a look at all of them and the decision was made that because funding is an issue, it's going to cost a lot of money to do these sorts of things. Really, we wanted to focus on the section in the middle, which are the yellow highlighted ones. And some of the treatments or the interventions include stormwater wetlands, daylighting of the creek, shared paths and improving amenity of those sorts of things, and investing in biodiversity as well. And you can see a bit of a flavour of the sorts of things that are there. The idea is that it would be a stage project, which I think makes sense for a lot of integrated water management projects, and come back and do the other stages at a later point in time. So I'm going to refer to those as we push through here. The other thing I want to do is to talk a little bit about the process that we kind of used in engaging with some of the stakeholders in the project. And again, referring back to that Blue-Green Infrastructure Guide, which I think is a fantastic resource. It includes a section or a chapter on developing the business case for integrated water management. And it includes a bit of a checklist, which you can see in that sort of duck egg blue, tealy green kind of square there. We focused on the little highlighted checklist points there. What are the quantifiable costs and benefits? And what are the non-quantifiable costs and benefits? Things that are hard to put dollar values on. And we engage with the council through those extra boxes I put on the side there to say, and we had even had the CEO of the council involved in this. If we do this project, those yellow highlighted ones from the previous slide, what's going to change in terms of the outcomes for the creek? We might get more biodiversity, we might get more people using the trail, those sorts of things. What's going to change? The arrow of the top says, well, what actions are needed to deliver those changes? We can then put in a second bigger box there. What are the costs over the project's life to deliver those things? Then we can ask, well, what are the benefits of those changes? And can we put those in dollar terms? And then the final one being, what is the project worthwhile doing? So it's a pretty straightforward benefit cost kind of framework. The work that Syed and his team have done, some of that research is adding some of those other things in there. Looking down the bottom, it's really important to consider what would happen if we did nothing, if we just tried to achieve those benefits without doing the project. So we can compare the changes, the relative change in terms of the with and the without project scenarios. So not measuring the overall benefit, we're measuring the change in benefit. We also want to look at whether there are any implementation risks. What if the people don't come? What if the plants don't grow? Some of those sort of questions. And similarly, are there any time lags there? Maybe if we're waiting for trees to grow, we need to allow those benefits, but it won't be until 10, 15 years down the track. So those are the sort of questions we went through, supported by the training that we provided. We got really good responses to those sort of questions to allow us to progress the business case. First step is always having a look at the costs. I mentioned we only had a look at some of the interventions, others will come later there. In the end, it's a multi-million-dollar project. You can see there that for the projects 2.2 to 3.4, those yellow highlight ones from the previous slide, the cost comes in at over $2.3 million, and that's without a contingency in there as well. So a fairly substantial project for what is a small regional council. We also had some consulting work to put numerical values around the things that are really easy to measure. We used the music model and some other work to quantify reduction in suspended solids, in nitrogen and phosphorus, changes in the flow regime, and also how much stormwater could be harvested. There is a recycled water program there which irrigates the golf course. There's opportunities to use some stormwater harvesting as well. So we've got some numbers there around some of the benefits and some numbers around the costs, which are a direct input into the benefit cost model. I mentioned before that we had a conversation around the benefits with the council and some of the internal stakeholders. And this leverages that list that Syed put up in his presentation, which comes from previous research that the CRC had done. You can see in there that in the boxes that the types of benefits that we talked about with the brackets there of what it actually meant for this particular property there. And just drawing your attention to, say, some of the recreation benefits. There's a swimming pool, a playground, and skate park, which are perceived to be underused. We've got to get more people coming to use those sorts of facilities. So the benefit would be more active people, more active community members using these sorts of benefits. There's a local aged care home that has already talked about getting people out from behind the television and in their comfy seats to being more active and going for walks and walking clubs and like. So there's some direct health benefits, both to the general community, but specifically to the aged care residents. I mentioned the RV park. There's a whole lot of visitors that come in. Some stay for one day, some stay for longer. Attractions that will keep them there and getting them spending in the local economy were really important benefits to Ray and to council. And I've also mentioned the cultural benefits with the artwork trail. And look, you can kind of see the sorts of things that are in there. So that list of benefits came from discussion with the council, and it really showed that the water quality and the water flow benefits are only one part of the broader benefits of the overall doing the project, despite it being badged as an integrated water management project. And you'll see what that is important as we go through. Then we hand over to Sayed and his team. He takes those benefits, and I'll focus just here as an example on the tourism benefits here. And this is the way he's presented the information. And this harks back to the slide that Sayed talked about of understanding what the benefit is, collecting data on how to quantify that benefit, in this case, number of visitors per year. And we talked to council about how many visitors you get now and how many additional visitors you might get if we completed the Beaufort Linear project. We wrote down our assumptions, and where we could, we went to an actual reference to quantify those sorts of things. So you can see there in the terms of the same day visitors, we've estimated 11,700 visitor days per year, and we've shown the calculations of how we come up with those sorts of things. Then we've linked that back to a source which says, well, how much dollar value can you put towards all those sorts of benefits? And allows us to add it up and quantify those things. I didn't intend to go through the detail of this, but just to say this is the type of work that we do in a benefit cost analysis, and this is just one benefit. You had that list of that table I just showed you before with a dozen or so benefits. We replicated this for each particular one. We add those sorts of things up, we compare the costs and the benefits, and we get some results. So we add up all of the present value. So in today's dollars, the value of those benefits, we get 15 million. I talked before about things like project risk. What if the tourists don't turn up? Or adoption risk? What if the trees don't survive? We adjust down those benefits to allow for those sorts of risks, and we get to 14.6 million. Cost is 12.2 million, and so we get the difference between those is a net present value of $2.4 million. When we look at that as a ratio, benefit cost ratio, we see it adds up to 1.19, which is greater than 1, which is a really good sign. So it says that the project is certainly worth doing from a community point of view, but it's not a huge benefit. It's 0.19 is it's there, but it's only just, if you like. So the message from this is that look, it is worth doing from council's point of view, but mainly from a whole of community point of view, and probably needs some prompting. We also had a look at who gets those benefits. It's just a little snapshot to say that the breakdown of, in dollar terms and in percentage share, where those benefits kind of go. And I mentioned before the importance of looking at those tourism and those visitor benefits. You can see that jumps out straight away with nearly 57% of the benefits going to those same day visitors. So project stacks up, but the key message here is that most of the benefits go to the people who are visiting. So next is the benefits to pollution abatement, so reducing the nitrogen and the like, and then the benefit to the longer stopover visits. And the insight from this is the project's worth doing, but from council's point of view as an organisation, there's not a lot of money flowing back to council for investment. The money and the benefits are going to the broader community and to visitors. And this sort of suggests that we should have a look at how a contribution can be made to the project from those different stakeholders. So you can sort of have a couple of takeaways from that. One is that integrated water management projects like Beaufort Linear create a range of co-benefits, and it's important to include these so that we don't underestimate the value of doing the project as a whole. It's not just about water. And if we take a water-only focus, we probably won't get the right result. Secondly, if a project is not particularly beneficial to the proponent, in this case, council, in a financial sense, we can turn this around and say, well, if DECA was going to invest through the IWM grants, we can actually put a dollar value on what the size of that benefit is going to look like, because we know it's a 1.19 benefit cost ratio, and we can put a dollar value of those benefits, but it goes to the broader community. That's what That's what Deaca's investing in, apart from capacity building when it funds the IWM grants. So it's really good information to go into future grant applications. Which leads it on to where we are now, which is that they have received a second grant. That's been used to do a master plan and community co-design. I've just taken a few snapshots in there to sort of show the fantastic work that's being done. They ran a big community engagement program. You've got some results there from the What We Heard surveys. They've broken the Beaufort Linear down into a zone 1, 2, 3, 4 staged approach. And you can see that they've been master planning that with some Worcester consultants and landscape architects. And then on the right-hand side, you start to see what some of the actual water-sensitive urban design interventions might be. In particular, that's the zone 2 there with some low flow and waterway and wetland interventions there. So it's progressing at a great rate of knots. And as I mentioned, there's now some hydrology and investigation of the flood mitigation benefits in conjunction with the CMA. So a huge success story for council and I think for Deaca and its IWM grants. So to round it out, well, how did the economics actually help in terms of attracting grants? And Darcy helped me out of here with a bit of inside goss into how Deaca assessed the second round grant in 3 little blobs here. The first one was that feedback on the Pyrenees Shire, that's the council we're talking about, on their funding application was how well they were able to articulate the benefits of doing the project rather than broad statements, and specifically how they're able to communicate the value of the intrinsic benefits beyond just what we'll call the usual metrics of how much water will you save, how much water can be harvested, what the pollution reductions might be. They're the easy things, but they're all articulate and describe in a great level of detail what those other benefits might be. And so from Deaca's point of view, they're investing in not just the project, but in capacity building. And this gave Deaca confidence that the Pyrenees Shire could then go to the next steps of using Infuse to go to the next level of detail and benefit cost analysis to build a really strong business case for ultimately capital funding or implementation funding down the track. So that's the Beaufort case study, and I'd encourage you to read that and the Barrandutta Fields case study, which is on the Worcester website. Chris, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. So that was a really good rundown of the process that we undertook with this project. And I think what we heard from my perspective, at least from Darcy, was some really high-level drivers that really pointed to why we needed to do this project, or why they wanted to do the project. There's a capacity building for stakeholders in regional Victoria. It was to sort of inform better economic assessment in regional areas, built on the fact that there's been a lot of good work done in metro areas. And then to be able to provide better and more robust information to go into business cases and then grant applications and the like. And I think we've seen that demonstrated with that good example that Jamie just presented. Ben talked about the approach that we used and the rigor that we used in coming up with the outcomes from this project, in terms of really going and speaking to people and hearing what they had to say in terms of the focus groups, and then speaking about the capacity building part. So the masterclass training and some guidance that we've provided, that once again built on the former CRC's work in the Infuse program. And then Syed talked a little bit more detail around the technical details around the Infuse program and the values tool. And one of the benefits of this project was to bring some more values into the values tool from a with a regional perspective as well. So that adds some value to the product as well. And then Jamie brought it together, essentially showing how that case study used all the elements to actually be successful, drive a successful outcome in having people do better business cases and get some first stages of funding for that project as well. So I think we've demonstrated an end-to-end process. Hopefully that's what other people got from the presentation. So now we're going to talk, have some question and answers. So I noticed that there's no questions that have been put in the Q&A section. Dan, can you just have a quick look, see if there isn't any in chat while I share my screen as well?
I think there was one,
Sure.
Chris.
There's just the one,
asked
yeah.
about
Go for it, Jamie.
the value of doing these sorts of investigations. Presumably it means something like the rapid case studies that we did for Barrandutta Fields and for Beaufort Linear. I was just trying to look up what we actually spent on it, to be honest. So I'm probably going to take that question on notice, to be honest.
Jamie, can I have a go at it? Because
sure.
I think at the risk of sounding like an economist, the answer to that question depends in that that the amount of time and effort that you put into the BCA should be directly proportionate to the nature of the project and what stage of the project you're at. So in the Part A guide that's been prepared, it shows a range of different ways that you can apply BCA principles, either as in a principled sense to help you define your project, identify your costs and benefits in a qualitative sense, and that doesn't cost much at all. It's basically you can sit down with a group of people, and for the cost of putting on some sandwiches, you can actually have a really good shared discussion about what is the project, what is the baseline that we're considering, and what are the benefits. And that can be very helpful in going from a long list of project options down to a shorter list. And once you get to your short list, or if the project is particularly important from a strategic point of view, or has some significant risks or a high cost, then you can move into thinking about, well, what would a qualitative BCA might look like? And again, that would be fit for purpose. And even the work that the team has done for Beaufort, that was done on a bunch of assumptions, and it was done at a pre sort of master planning sort of phase. So as and it sort of said that there are some, it's a good project, but there are some big assumptions there, and some of those assumptions could actually swing it from being a good project to a project where the costs are greater than the benefits. So it helped identify some areas that would be worth some further investigation if the size of the project or the strategic importance of it justified some further investment. So, and maybe Syed might like to add some thoughts about this as well, but I guess that's why I was sort of saying the answer to the question of what do one of these sorts of projects cost, that the answer is often it depends, and it depends on the stage that you're at, and the information that you have, and the information that you actually need to be able to make a good decision. Syed, over to you.
Yeah, I would just add, like, for that Beaufort one, I think altogether we took about 4 to 5 months from the start to finish, like producing that report. And this was a rapid assessment, so there was no field visit or anything like that. It was just based on desktop and common consultations with and working with the experts from the council. That's it. So just to give you an idea of like the kind of investment went into that analysis.
Thanks, Syed. What we might do is, if anyone's got any questions they'd like to just pose to the panel verbally, then bring yourself off mute and ask your question. We've put some thought starters there to get your mind thinking about what questions you might have. And some of the things we were thinking about was, what are the IWM benefits in your region? Recognising, as I think Ben was saying, that context was really important here, and some benefits in one part of the state or one part of the country indeed may actually be costs in other parts as well. So thinking about that, because we're keen to hear about some other benefits as well. And then likewise with the challenges, and we're particularly interested to hear from anyone who might see how this might work in their context in other parts of the country as well. And then another one would be those challenges. Did the ones that we talked about with Beaufort Linear, did they ring true with you? And then is there any that we may have missed, basically? So, or any other questions you may have for the presenters, feel free to just unmute yourself or put your hand up or something like that.
Chris, there is another one in the chat there.
Is it?
A question we get asked quite often about interest rates, which interest rate to use, particularly when looking at, say, a 30-year project. So it might be best to answer that question. So the question is really what guideline to use to look up interest rates.
That's a very important question. I was trying to think what is the relevant. It's quite challenging as well, but I think there are some state level guidelines from the treasuries and others. specifically for IWM type projects, which has lots of environmental benefits. So there are, like, if you look at our BCA tool, like the Infuse BCA tool and the guidelines, there would be some general descriptions. Yes, and then also I would suggest that we have to look into the state-specific guidelines and what the Treasury's recommendation. Ben might also have a thought on this.
Yeah, I guess all of I think Said's provided a really good answer. And the thing that I would add is that whatever forecast you use is probably going to be wrong, particularly if you're looking over a 30-year time horizon. And so one of the things that we talked a lot about in the training modules was the importance of sensitivity testing. So for example, with Beaufort, we tested a range of different interest rates, and it was greater than the BCR was greater than 1 for all of them. So it sort of gives us a reasonable amount of confidence that if there are some unexpected changes in interest rates in the future, then this project will still be a good project, given that assumption. Whereas for others, you could imagine that if they're marginal and you don't sort of test the sensitivity of the interest rates, you could end up with some nasty surprises in the future if things don't go as you forecasted.
Is there anyone got any questions they'd like to pose to the presenters? If they don't, then I'll just give you 30 seconds or so to think about that. But while I've got the floor, could I ask maybe Darcy
Chris,
to...
Daniel has raised his hand.
Okay, sorry, I've got too many screens open. I can't see the slides as well as yeah. Go for it, Daniel.
Thanks, Said and Chris. Daniel Calabora from the Latrobe City Council. First, just a comment to say thank you so much for doing all this work. I know when we're developing infrastructure business cases, when to start stepping into intangible benefits, it gets pretty nervous, I think, for me to put my name to that and put it up in front of the council to endorse an investment. So it's really great to see something that's so much bigger to give me the confidence to put that forward. We've seen in some different schemes that we've looked at here, we're not seeing a black and white return on investment just on capital costs and potable water money saving. But the infrastructure that we do see through private development and our own development, for example, in wetlands, are really well celebrated community assets. And linking those two with some numbers helps us do more of that. And when we start thinking about urban greening and other things, there's a lot of this that we could use for other projects as well. So quick comment to say, thank you very much for doing this work. It's really important for us.
Thank you.
Can I jump in? It's Doug from Barwon Water in Victoria. Just had a question about Beaufort. Perhaps I misunderstood, but did you use the valuation tool that Syed had described to value the benefits in that work, or did you value them some other way and then use the outcomes of that to help populate Syed's work?
Let me take that one. No, it was highly integrated. So so we had 2 case studies, and those case studies are to demonstrate how to apply benefit transfer. So the guidelines I talked briefly about before, and then see, and that was theoretical, right? So these are the steps that we had to go through. But then those 2 case studies are demonstration of those guidelines.
Okay.
So at the same time, in parallel, integrated, highly integrated. Yeah.
But when you got to the particular matter of placing a value on the identified benefits, you used your tool.
Use my tool,
resource, sorry, of all those.
Yes.
Those studies.
Yes.
Okay.
And if the information was missing in the tool, we add it to the tool.
Yes. Great.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions? Maybe I'll ask Darcy a question, and I'm just interested on behalf of the audience, I hope, of how you see this process embedding into DECA process going forward. You've talked a little bit about how you wanted to see better business cases and better applications for grants, but how do you see this embedding into your process for regional Victoria going forward?
Thanks, Chris. So it can't, putting this economic evaluation behind your project application can only benefit it. It's not going to be at this point a requirement for if say we have another IWM grant program at some point, it's not going to be a requirement because not everyone has these skills to do it yet. Not everyone's participated in this kind of masterclass series. But like I said, when you support your own application with specific numbers and just the rigor, it just provides more confidence for the grant assessor to support your project. And I think the other part about it, when you really articulate and understand your own benefits of what your project is, it just diversifies the funding streams that you can go for. Like I said before, where you can apply for maybe more of a livability kind of grant stream or an ecology grant stream. So when you understand your benefits, you actually give yourself more flexibility in what to go for. So it won't just be relying on IWM grant and IWM grant stream.
Great, thanks for that. Got time for probably one or maybe two quick questions, if anyone's got any burning questions in their kit box.
Chris, can I put in a quick plug for some, just briefly while we wait for questions, a quick plug for two other projects that we've started. Sure. So today we talked a lot about benefits associated with IWM projects. We've also got another project looking at, and this is a national project, looking at better quantification and understanding of the life cycle costs of green infrastructure. And that the outputs of that will be a tool that sits next to the work that Syed has done and the BCA tool. So there'll be a tool to identify the benefits, a tool to help you better understand life cycle costs, and a BCA model that brings it all together. So there's that one. And then there's another one that we're just scoping up now and hope to start in July that looks at how do you better integrate the issue of climate resilience or climate adaptation into a BCA analysis. And again, that'll be sort of a whole of Victoria facing project, but we'll probably see if colleagues in other states are also interested in being involved. Thanks, Chris. Back to you.
No worries. And there's one question in the Q&A, which is one that I resonate with as well. And I'll point it to Ben, and it's to do with how can the approach be applied in other states as well as other countries?
Yeah, so in the chat, I've included some links to some case studies that have been done in other states. And we've also applied this same tool in other countries, particularly developing countries. And it's really interesting because in those places, you quite often don't have all the data that you would like. You quite often have some significant data gaps. So providing good information that is decision useful in a place where you don't have the data is a real challenge. But what we sort of do is run, in that sort of case, the process is just as important as the numbers that come out of that process. And that process needs to be transparent. It needs to be clear on what your assumptions are. And sensitivity testing is really important so that it gives you a sense of how sensitive your conclusions are to different assumptions and where you might look if you've got some time and budget to do a little bit further work on chasing information. So I'll put a link into some of our international projects just for information as well. Thanks, Chris.
No worries. Thanks, Ben. In the interest of time, we might call it on the questions now, but if there's any unanswered questions in the platform, we can answer them later and supply them through the platform at a later date. So just a quick plug while we've got you for our next webinar, which will be on the 8th of May, and we'll be talking about the life cycle costs in water sensitive investments. So as Ben just talked about before, this is bringing a lot more rigor to the cost side of this whole economic assessment process. So I encourage you to register using that QR code there as well. And we look forward to seeing you there if you've got the time. And there's also a program of extra webinars that go all the way out to later on this year, August, September this year. So once again, you can have a look at that and pre-register for any of those as you see fit. And finally, I'd like to thank, what I should actually say before I do that is that the recording for this presentation, as well as the slides, will come out via the platform shortly after this webinar finishes. So with that said, I'd like to thank the 4 presenters. So we had Darcy Whiffen from DECA, we had Ben Firmage from Water Sensitive Cities Australia, Sayed Iftikhar from Griffith Uni, and Jamie Hewitt from Alluvium. So I'd like to thank them. I'd like to thank their support team who in the background have been helping to run the platform and do a lot of the work to get this process working well for the day. And also I'd like to thank everyone who attended today for your time, and we hope you got something out of it. And with that, I'll say thank you, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Chris.